Michelle Pfeiffer is in the middle of a career resurgence and stars in not one but two upcoming TV series, and she credits her husband, David E. Kelley, for supporting her. Michelle told Entertainment Tonight, "I think we both know that I've put in my time, and now it is my time."
For years, Hollywood insiders treated it like the industry's worst-kept secret. Nobody would confirm it. Nobody would completely deny it either. It was simply one of those stories that refused to disappear. A film about temptation. Two married stars. An on-screen romance so convincing that audiences wondered if the cameras had captured something more than acting. Then, after decades of almost complete silence, one carefully chosen comment from John Malkovich reignited a mystery people thought had been buried forever. It wasn't a dramatic confession. There was no explosive interview or shocking headline. Instead, it was something much quieter, and perhaps because of that, far more intriguing. His words didn't answer every question. If anything, they created even more. So what really happened between Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich during the making of Dangerous Liaisons? Why did rumors follow them for more than 30 years? And why are people still debating a relationship that neither of them has ever publicly explained in full? This isn't just the story of an alleged Hollywood romance. It's the story of two careers at their peak, two marriages that would soon come to an end, and one mystery that still refuses to fade. Because sometimes the loudest stories in Hollywood are the ones told almost entirely through silence. To understand why this rumor became one of Hollywood's longest-running whisper stories, you have to go back to the late 1980s. On the surface, Dangerous Liaisons looked like another elegant period drama. In reality, it was anything but ordinary. Set in 18th-century France, the film explored manipulation, obsession, betrayal, and the dangerous game of seduction among the aristocracy. Every conversation hid another scheme. Every romance carried another secret. Every victory came at someone else's emotional expense. It wasn't designed to make audiences comfortable. It was designed to leave them fascinated. Director Stephen Frears assembled an extraordinary cast. Glenn Close brought icy intelligence to the calculating Marquise de Mertert. John Malkovich became the charming yet morally corrupt Vicomte de Valmont, a man who viewed love as little more than another competition. And Michelle Pfeiffer played Madame de Tourvel, a deeply principled woman whose certainty slowly crumbled under Valmont's relentless pursuit. The emotional battle between Malkovich and Pfeiffer became the heart of the film. One character determined to seduce. The other determined to resist. Until resistance slowly became surrender. Every scene demanded enormous emotional vulnerability. Their conversations weren't filled with explosions or chase sequences. Instead, they relied on lingering eye contact, quiet conversations, hesitation, longing, and emotional tension that grew stronger with every passing scene. That tension became one of the film's greatest strengths. Audiences believed every moment. Critics praised the performances. The film earned multiple Academy Award nominations and quickly established itself as one of the defining prestige dramas of its era. But once filming ended, people weren't talking only about what happened on screen. They were asking a very different question. Was that chemistry entirely fictional? Or had something happened once the cameras stopped rolling? Hollywood has always had a habit of blurring the line between performance and reality. Actors spend months living inside emotionally intense stories. They rehearse together, travel together, work incredibly long days together. Sometimes they spend more time with one another than with their own families. Most productions end with everyone returning to normal life. Occasionally, they don't. When rumors first began circulating after Dangerous Liaisons, nobody claimed to have witnessed some dramatic public affair. Instead, the whispers described something much harder to define. Crew members supposedly noticed unusual closeness. Entertainment journalists heard stories from people connected to the production. Industry gossip spread from one conversation to another until the speculation developed a life of its own. Like so many Hollywood legends, nobody could point to one definitive source. Yet somehow everyone seemed to know the story. Or at least, their version of it. The more people repeated it, the larger it became. And because neither star publicly addressed the speculation in any meaningful way, the mystery only deepened. Hollywood has never been particularly patient with unanswered questions. Silence often becomes part of the narrative itself. At the time, Michelle Pfeiffer's career was soaring. She had already proven she possessed both remarkable beauty and remarkable range, a combination that made her one of the industry's most sought-after actresses. Unlike many stars surrounded by constant tabloid drama, Pfeiffer maintained a surprisingly private public image. She rarely courted controversy. She chose her interviews carefully. And despite growing fame, she managed to keep much of her personal life away from cameras. She was married to television writer and producer Peter Horton. From the outside, their relationship appeared refreshingly stable. No endless public feuds. No sensational headlines. Just two successful professionals quietly building a life together while navigating increasingly demanding careers. John Malkovich occupied a very different place in Hollywood. He wasn't marketed as a traditional leading man. His appeal came from something harder to define. He possessed an intensity that could make even the quietest scene feel unpredictable. Long before audiences associated him with eccentric or unforgettable characters, fellow actors already regarded him as one of the finest performers of his generation. His background in Chicago's celebrated Steppenwolf Theater Company had shaped both his craft and his personal life. There he met actress Glenn Headley. Their relationship grew alongside their artistic ambitions. For years, their marriage was intertwined with the theater company that helped launch both careers. It wasn't simply a romantic partnership. It was a shared creative life. Which is exactly why later rumors attracted so much attention. Neither Pfeiffer nor Malkovich seemed like obvious candidates for Hollywood scandal. Both were married. Both had established careers. Both had reputations that suggested professionalism rather than chaos. That contrast made the gossip even harder for people to ignore. Then something else happened. Within roughly the same period following the film's release, both marriages came to an end. Michelle Pfeiffer and Peter Horton divorced. John Malkovich and Glenn Headley also separated, ending not only their marriage but a partnership that had stretched back through years of theater and artistic collaboration. It's important to be careful here. A timeline is not proof. The end of two marriages does not automatically confirm the rumors surrounding a film production. Relationships are complicated. People separate for deeply personal reasons that outsiders rarely understand. But Hollywood tabloids weren't interested in nuance. They connected the dots almost immediately. A romantic film. Two co-stars. Two divorces. To gossip magazines, the story practically wrote itself. From that point forward, the alleged relationship became part of Hollywood folklore. Never fully verified. Never completely dismissed. Just repeated often enough that it became one of those stories everyone seemed to know, even if nobody could say exactly where the information had originated. Years turned into decades. The headlines faded. Both actors moved on with successful careers. And eventually the rumor settled into that strange category occupied by so many famous Hollywood stories. Not confirmed history. Not proven fiction. Simply, an unanswered question. For more than 30 years, that question remained exactly where it had always been. Until one interview quietly changed the conversation. And what John Malkovich chose to say wasn't dramatic. In fact, its power came from everything he chose not to say. For someone as famously private as John Malkovich, even a few carefully chosen sentences can become front-page news. He has never been known for oversharing. Unlike many celebrities who revisit old romances in memoirs or television interviews, Malkovich has spent decades revealing almost nothing about his personal life. Which is why, when he finally addressed the long-standing rumors surrounding Dangerous Liaisons, people listened very carefully. They weren't expecting a dramatic confession. What they got instead was something much more subtle, and perhaps far more revealing. During a rare interview reflecting on different chapters of his career, Malkovich acknowledged that the subject wasn't one he normally discussed. He reportedly admitted that it was not something I ever really talk about. On the surface, that sounds almost meaningless. But for many people following this story, those words stood out immediately. He wasn't dismissing the rumors as ridiculous. He wasn't saying nothing had happened. Nor was he offering a detailed explanation. Instead, he simply made it clear that it was a subject he had deliberately avoided for decades. Sometimes what someone refuses to elaborate on can attract just as much attention as what they openly admit. Then came another comment that sparked even more discussion. Speaking about Michelle Pfeiffer, Malkovich described her as someone he greatly valued as a colleague. He praised her professionalism, describing her as fair, talented, and genuinely enjoyable to work alongside. Those comments weren't controversial by themselves. Actors compliment former co-stars all the time. But what followed gave those compliments an entirely different meaning. Malkovich reflected on what can happen when a professional relationship between actors becomes more than simply professional. His observation was thoughtful rather than sensational. He suggested that once a working relationship crosses that line, you risk losing something incredibly valuable. A great colleague. That single remark immediately reignited decades of speculation. People interpreted it in different ways. Some believed it was the closest thing to confirmation the public was ever likely to receive. Others argued it was simply a philosophical reflection about relationships in general. The truth is, his words leave room for both interpretations. And perhaps that was intentional. Malkovich has always been known for choosing his language carefully. He rarely speaks without considering exactly how his words will be understood. Rather than offering a tabloid-style revelation, he seemed more interested in describing consequences than revisiting old emotions. If there was regret in his comments, it didn't sound like regret over a lost romance. It sounded like regret over losing a creative partnership. That distinction matters. Because throughout the interview, he never spoke about scandal. He spoke about collaboration. About respect. About someone whose talent he deeply admired. For many observers, that emotional emphasis made his comments even more compelling. What makes the story even more fascinating is the person who still hasn't spoken. Michelle Pfeiffer. Despite decades of speculation, countless interviews, and endless opportunities to respond, Pfeiffer has remained remarkably consistent. She has never publicly confirmed the rumors. She has never publicly denied them either. Instead, she has simply refused to participate in the conversation. In today's celebrity culture, that level of discipline is surprisingly rare. Many public figures eventually feel pressure to explain old controversies. Some write memoirs. Some give revealing interviews. Others attempt to correct the public record. Pfeiffer has done none of those things regarding this particular chapter of her life. Her silence has remained unchanged for more than 3 decades. That doesn't prove anything one way or the other. But it has certainly kept people wondering. It's also worth addressing something that often gets lost in online headlines. Many articles suggest Michelle Pfeiffer has finally admitted the affair. Based on the public record, that isn't accurate. The recent attention comes from Malkovich's comments, not from Pfeiffer herself. As far as publicly available interviews show, she still hasn't spoken directly about the rumors. That distinction is important, because speculation should never be presented as established fact. While the gossip continued to circulate over the years, both actors quietly rebuilt their lives. Michelle Pfeiffer entered an entirely new chapter. She later married television and film producer David E. Kelley, and together they built one of Hollywood's more enduring marriages. Rather than chasing constant publicity, they focused on family. Pfeiffer has often spoken about protecting her children from unnecessary attention and creating as normal a home life as possible despite worldwide fame. Professionally, she entered what many critics consider the strongest period of her career. Within only a few years came performances that firmly established her as one of Hollywood's finest actresses. The Fabulous Baker Boys, Frankie and Johnny, Batman Returns. Each role demonstrated a different side of her talent. She wasn't simply becoming more famous. She was becoming one of the defining actresses of her generation. Even decades later, she successfully introduced herself to entirely new audiences through major modern productions, proving her career had remarkable longevity. John Malkovich followed a very different path. Instead of embracing traditional Hollywood stardom, he continued building a career defined by unpredictability. One year he might appear in an intense psychological drama. The next, a dark comedy. Then an international production few mainstream audiences had even heard about. He developed a reputation for choosing projects because they interested him, not because they fit expectations. His personal life also found greater stability. He built a long-term relationship with Nicoletta Perron, and together they raised a family largely away from Hollywood's constant spotlight. Europe became home for much of that life. Distance from Los Angeles seemed to suit him. Throughout the years, he remained exactly what audiences had always found fascinating. Unpredictable. Intelligent. Impossible to categorize. Looking back today, it's remarkable how little of this story is actually built on certainty. There are no dramatic public confessions. No leaked letters. No secret recordings. No detailed memoir exposing hidden truths. Instead, the story survives because of something much more powerful. Ambiguity. People naturally try to complete unfinished stories. When enough questions remain unanswered, imagination often fills the empty spaces. That's exactly what happened here. One carefully worded interview. One lifelong silence. And decades of speculation connecting everything in between. Perhaps that's why this story continues to fascinate people long after the film itself first captivated audiences. It's about far more than an alleged romance. It's about the unusual emotional world actors inhabit. Imagine spending months portraying two people falling deeply in love, repeating intensely emotional scenes again and again, depending completely on another performer to create moments that feel authentic. Most viewers only see the finished film. They never witness the countless rehearsals, late-night shoots, emotional exhaustion, or trust required behind the scenes. For actors, those boundaries can become incredibly complex. Sometimes they remain exactly where they should. Sometimes they become blurred. And sometimes, outsiders spend decades debating where that line truly existed. Perhaps the biggest lesson from this story isn't whether every rumor was true. We may never know. The people who know the full story have largely chosen to keep it private. And maybe that's exactly how they want it to remain. What we do know is this. Both Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich went on to build extraordinary careers. Both rebuilt their personal lives. Both became respected figures in the film industry for reasons that extend far beyond one production made decades ago. Yet somehow, one film continues to follow them. One set of rumors refuses to disappear. And one carefully measured interview has reminded Hollywood that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't solved by dramatic confessions. They're sustained by silence. Because silence has a strange power. It allows every generation to ask the same question again. What really happened? Perhaps we'll never have a complete answer. Perhaps we were never supposed to. And maybe that's why, after all these years, Dangerous Liaisons remains more than just a classic film. It remains the center of one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. If you enjoyed uncovering this fascinating piece of Hollywood history, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think John Malkovich's words changed the story, or do they simply leave even more room for interpretation? And if you enjoy timeless Hollywood mysteries, forgotten scandals, and the untold stories behind legendary films and stars, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the stories Hollywood tries hardest to bury become the ones people remember forever.